get it.
So if we woke you up in the middle of the night and shook you, say, "Are you liberal?" You would say, "No."
Yeah, I'll tell it because some people here may have been in New York, but the story I tell about me being conservative, I was going to Grace Church School when I was a kid down here. I was part of the all-Jewish boys davening choir at Grace, where we would sing, but we would not, to square it with our religion, we wouldn't sing the word Jesus. So the volume would drop in the hymns, and then it would come up after. And my parents, I was 5, and they took me to a be-in in Central Park. And a be-in was where hippies would go just to be. As part of their being, they would put a garbage can on fire, threw their wallets into it to demonstrate how little they cared about money and material things. And I was 5, and I saw a $5 bill on fire in the garbage can, and I reached up, grabbed it, and ran away. And that was my first step over to the right. But the kind of conservative I think I am is actually kind of New Yorkish. First, I'm a Burkean, and the phrase there is epistemological modesty, to know how little we know about the world and how careful we should be about planning. And I actually grew up in a culture, and I say it's New Yorkish, the phrase was think Yiddish, act British. And so there was sort of an Anglophilic Jewish culture here, where all the parents gave their kids names which they thought were quintessentially English and nobody would ever associate with Judaism. And they were names like Sidney, Milton, and Irving. And of course, they immediately became Jewish names. But
Irving Place, just downtown,
yeah, right.
is an early Irving.
And so that's the first part, the Burkeanism, which is modesty about planning. And Obama has great faith in planning, which I'll never have. And then the second, I say it here, Hamiltonianism. Very quickly, Alexander Hamilton. We have the current conservatives are very Jeffersonian, limiting government to enhance freedom, and the current liberals are, I don't know what, but they're very believe in using government to enhance equality. And so those are the two main strains in American politics, but there are 6 of us in the country who believe in Hamiltonianism, which is limited but energetic government to enhance social mobility. So giving people the tools to compete in a capitalist economy, but keeping it a pretty free capitalist economy. And there are very few of us who believe that, but I'm one of them. So I'm in I think, a conservative strand that used to exist in American life, but no longer really exists as much.
So, we're both from Washington, which is consumed with an interesting experiment in human behavior that's going on right now. And I just wonder how you, particularly given your interest in understanding human behavior better, how you make sense of what we're going through every week with them, trying to reconcile our hopes about what we think we can afford as a country, what we don't want to pay for as a country, what we can't really afford.
Yeah, I have a vast meta theory that would take me 20 minutes to sketch about why we're in this mess fundamentally. I fundamentally think it's not a Washington problem, it's a national problem, it's a cultural problem. And the short answer is we went from a culture, I think, that emphasized citizenship to the expense of individualism in the 50s, say, or World War II generation, to a culture that emphasized individualism at the expense of citizenship through the 60s and the 80s, these 2 cultural revolutions. And as a result, 2 things happened. One, people, even in the 30s, FDR had a strong incentive not to, they wanted to spend a lot of money, but you could see them in the 30s viscerally reacting against the idea that they were going to put costs on future generations, because they saw themselves as part of a chain of generations, and they had a visceral horror against that. Now, in a much more individualistic culture, we've lost that horror, and now we want more government than we're willing to pay for. I'm just going to throw in one statistic to illustrate this cultural change. In 1950, the Gallup organization asked high school seniors, "Are you a very important person?" And 12% said yes. In 2005, they asked the same question, and 80% said yes. So there's been a shift, are you a very important person? And as a result of that shift, people want to spend on themselves as befits their station, and they have less of a sense of common citizenship. And I think that's the fundamental problem. And so I think what politicians are, they generally want to do the right thing. They can read the numbers. They now know how unaffordable the course we're on. But the politics of it are the politics of it. And they're trying to meld what they think is responsible from what is politically survivable. And when I look at Paul Ryan, I think he's vastly overconfident in his ability to sell his program. Whatever you think of the program, and I think in some ways it's responsible, in some ways I don't like it, but it is politically suicidal, I think. And I've had
turn Medicare into a voucher program.
Yeah, and to, you know, he really would. I think I don't necessarily agree with the way he does it, but it is certainly a fact that seniors and middle-class people have to pay more if they want to keep these programs. That's just a fact. And he says, yeah, we'll make them pay more this way. But I don't think they want to pay more. And I think they will punish you for asking them to pay more. And so I've had a debate with him, and I said, you know, look at the polls, it's crazy. And he says, look, I win in my district. Obama carried my district in Wisconsin, and I win.
Yeah. But you know, to paraphrase a past president, it also depends what the meaning of "they" is. That is, they don't want to pay more, but on the other hand, during the Wisconsin budget battle, actually, I put this to you on the air. There was a poll asking Wisconsin voters, "What about raising taxes for people with incomes over $150,000?" And it was over 72% said, "Yeah, that's a good element of a solution to do that." It's just been taken off the table by poll writers.
That's right.
They will not consider it as being part of the answer.
Right. No, I agree with that. And my problem with Wisconsin was I think we need to cut, but we need to have a few principles about cutting. One of them is that everybody should have to suffer as much as possible. Whereas in Wisconsin, Walker just asked his political opponents to suffer. Well, that's going to undermine any sense of common purpose. And then we have to cut in a way that is that cuts consumption and rewards investment, that cuts seniors and rewards young families. And now we're doing the opposite. The one final psychological thing I'll say, and this is about Obama, he knows the reality of it. But I saw him last week, and it's interesting how he's got many features that are off the charts, good and bad, but one of them is self-confidence. He's the most self-confident person I've ever met in my life. I'm convinced that the word Obama will be the unit of measure for self-confidence in 80 years. It'll be like he's got 120 Obamas, he's got 190 Obamas. But the other thing one sees in him now is the fierce competitiveness. He's a very competitive person. And now, because he's getting into campaign mode, it was for 2 or 3 years he was very much in governing mode, very calm, and okay, we'll do this, we'll do this. Now he's got the competitive juices flowing, and now it's just let's beat the crap out of Ryan and Republicans. And you see that, the sort of competitive juices overtaking everything else.
Does he have any serious opposition for the nomination? Somebody who obviously looms out there as the person who could take the White House from him?
You mean a Democrat?
No, a Republican.
Oh, Republican. You know, I don't think so. I mean, Jim Steinberg's, I assume, will serve in the Trump administration. He'll do 2 years here, and then he'll go off back to the Trump. You know, I think it's a weak field for obvious reasons. I think most Republicans say it's a weak field. I think the strongest Republican candidate is Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana. I like him because he's 5'6", low to the ground and touch of the people. I think only how many times in American history has a shorter candidate won? I'm trying to think.
Must have been Madison.
Carter beat Ford. I think he was shorter, but not too many. Not too many. I would like to see a 5'6" guy win, but I'm not sure he's going to run. It's come either or. But you know, the other candidates I think are weak, and just Obama's political positioning I think is very deft. It's sure we need to cut, but I'm not going to tell you where. I'll appoint a commission and they'll come up with some cuts. I think that's the political sweet spot in terms of cutting. And so I think he's just a strong candidate on many grounds.
Well, if he's a strong candidate at the top of the ticket in 2012, and if the Republicans don't have a very strong field, is the huge Republican majority in the House likely to be reduced, do you think? Not that I'll hold you to your answer. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guess, but not that maybe likely to be reduced, but the people, I don't study this for a living. I mean, I pay attention, but I know people who study every congressional district on earth, and we know these people.
Yeah.
And if you go to Charlie Cook or Michael Barone or these people, and you say, well, how's the Wisconsin third race looking to you? You could pick any race in the country. They'll say, oh, well, the Kozlowski's moved off Maple Street, so that's 3 fewer Democrats. And then, I mean, they just know it to incredible. And my sense is they think there's relatively little danger of the Republicans losing control of the House. and some possibility of them picking up the Senate because there are far, far, far more Democrats up this year than there are Republicans in the Senate. And so there's a natural Republican advantage there. But did they predict the Republicans taking over last time? Probably not at this point. So,
Before we take questions from the audience, I wanted to ask you about your education, since you've written a good deal about education. I mean, you have a bachelor's degree. You're dear to the heart those of us who are unlettered beyond the AB. But also, you learned a lot from covering things and from being a journalist. Is it which I think for most of us who work in journalism, it's kind of an undisciplined, random way of learning a tremendous amount of things about a tremendous amount of things. Do you think of that as your formation?
Yeah, I mean, I learned in college that I don't think very well in abstractions. I need examples. And so going off, and I thought I was going to be a novelist or a playwright. And I worked for a thing called the Chicago Review, and our only pleasure in life was rejecting short stories from Joyce Carol Oates, I remember. But in the course of that, I became a reporter for the City News Bureau of Chicago, which is a wire service. And I just did it because I needed a job. And
it's a fabled institution.
Yeah, fabled.
In
so
Chicago.
we would, in Chicago, they do not have press rooms in police buildings. So we just sat, when the detectives got up, we just sat in their desks. And then when they came back, we found another desk. We were right there with them. And as a result, they loathed us. They used to throw us back in lockup with the prostitutes and did horrible, horrible things to us. But my first day on the job, there were a lot of things happened. My first day, a kid committed suicide. I had to call all the neighbors. And so I never took the phrase journalistic ethics too seriously after that because it was snooping. But you just learned about reality, you got to see things. And then I remember I covered an incredible number of stupid people. Criminals in general, not the smartest people. I remember I covered a bunch of guys who broke out of jail, got hungry, there was a McDonald's across the street. They went to the McDonald's and sat in the window and ate their burgers. And the cops are running out of the jail, and there they are sitting there. And so I covered, but in the course of journalism, I always tell journalism students, if you're in a football stadium and the crowd is doing the wave, and you're the sort of person who doesn't get up and do the wave, you just sit there, then you should be a journalist, because you have the sort of aloof personality that's right for the profession. And we don't get to take part in anything, but we get, in the course of my career, you've actually been around many more people than I have, but I've got to meet Mandela, Reagan, Thatcher, Gorbachev, all these people.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Pedro Martinez.
That I've never had. That would be a peak. One doesn't want to peak too soon.
He's a very charming guy. Should we be funding the educational system that is miseducating America by your lights, that is not teaching us the right way to succeed?
Well, let me first say, Pedro Martinez, the best interview I ever had in my life was Jackie Gleason. I was in a hotel room in Miami, and his wife walked in, pushed a $24 cassette recorder, and with Tonight Show music, da-da-da-da-da, and then in walks Jackie Gleason. I'm just sitting there alone in a room, and for an hour and a half, he tells me great stories. So that was fun.
These are the real joys of journalism.
And the educational system, I think we should be funding it from this research. I spent a lot more time thinking about early childhood education than I did before. I care about that more than anything else. I think it really is the way to have the biggest bang for the buck. I also think one of the themes of the research is that the things we think are soft and squishy are actually hard and practical. And so I'm generally very optimistic about education reform, more so than any other part of government right now, because we've had all these reforms since the Nation at Risk report, and they were all disappointing because they skirted the core issue, which was the individual relationship between a teacher and a student. And we're now actually doing reforms that work on that relationship. And so the stuff that Michelle Rhee was doing and Joel Klein, the stuff that KIPP schools are doing, the Harlem Children's Zone, all this stuff is really focusing on the core issue. And there are great early childhood educations programs that are around the country. Head Start needs to be reformed, but it's important. And so all that stuff is really burbling forth. My only concern is that as we cut, we're going to cut based on an old version of human capital, which says the things we can count and measure are the things that matter. All this stuff is peripheral. And so we'll focus on the reading and math, which is important, but we'll cut the art and music because we think that's peripheral. But if you pay attention to the emotions, that's actually central. And then, you know, I met a guy at Sacramento not long ago. He said, the way I keep my kids in school is through the ABCs, athletics, band, and cheerleading. And if you cut those things, you lose a lot of people. Yeah. And so I would rearrange the funding, but I would keep funding.
Okay. We have